There we go. Thanks. Well, welcome everybody to the Professional Development Consortium of Hampton Roads. That's a mouthful. Our workshop today focusing on hybrid event planning. I'm glad you could take some time out of your day to join us. We talked about earlier when we opened the doors, we were going to not only record this, but we're going to ask people to stay engaged and present as best they feel comfortable. So there's no directive that you must have your video on. We'd love it if you could. But if you want to take an eyeball break and look away or take care of the dogs or whatever it is, you're more than welcome to do so. We'll have everybody, looks like everybody's got the beautiful protocol of self-mute. And you'll all have the power to unmute and mute yourself. If someone's got a really noisy background and left their microphone on, I'll fix that for you. So with that, just tell you a tiny little bit about the Professional Development Consortium. Just, even though obviously you knew enough to find us here, just kind of high-level overview of who we are. So PDCHR, the consortium, or whatever it is I choose to call it in the moment, is a non-for-profit organization. We are an educational platform really focused on helping the leaders of membership associations lead smarter, not harder. So most of our stuff is free. A couple things during the year we charge, a dollar or two or more for just to kind of keep us going. But we've got, gosh, look at my calendar, got like 18 or 19 events laid on for this year. So there's plenty of stuff. Our monthly things, we tend to focus on managerial skills, which there's a ton of associated with putting on a successful hybrid event. And also once a quarter, we do something that speaks more to broader leadership talents that are, applicable as, someone running an organization, and also probably, to some degree applicable to whatever it is you're up to on your, in your day job, as it were. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to my friend and colleague, Deanie Dormer. Deanie, if you take a moment and say, introduce yourself, and then you got the share screen powers.
Yeah, perfect. All right, thanks so much, guys. I'm so happy to be able to be here and talk with you all for a little bit over our lunch hour about hybrid events, a little bit of virtual and things like that. I am the owner and event strategist of Executive Events. We're based here in Hampton Roads out of Norfolk. One of the big things that we do is work with organizations to help them put on events that reach their business goals. So not just putting on an event to throw a fun party so we can feel popular because these many people came or anything like that, but making sure that an event can fit into your marketing plan. So looking through your whole marketing plan and seeing where an event can fit in. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. I want this to be pretty interactive. So if you have a question, please feel free to jump in. Just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask me the question. Also, Mark's going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions as we go along that you don't want to unmute, go ahead and put it in that chat and we'll answer that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Here's some of my information if you want to take that down. Also, you guys will be getting a copy of this, so you don't have to write and take notes furiously if you don't want to. All right, so virtual and hybrid events in your marketing strategy. Here's some places you can look up Executive Events to learn a little bit more about us if you like. So let's go ahead and go. All right, so here's what we're going to go through today. Here's our agenda. We're going to talk about the components of a virtual or hybrid event, going through a little bit of the pros and cons, right? So we're having some challenges, putting on these virtual events. You guys said, engaging customers, engaging attendees and members, deciding to host. Should you do a virtual event? We've had people that are still waiting, that double Dutch thing, waiting to see how things are going to go, what the governor is going to say. Should we do an event right now? And should you do events in general, right? I've told people before not to do an event because they weren't clear on their goals or what they're trying to get out of the event. So I believe that deciding whether or not to host an event is, strategic as well. Can your goals be met with a virtual event, right? And then what platforms do we use for virtual and hybrid and different things like that? And how can you increase membership with an event? And how do you engage attendees? So we talked about that a little bit earlier when we were coming on. So those are the things that we're going to kind of go over today. Sounds good? Thumbs up? All right, let's get started. Okay, so what is a hybrid event? A hybrid event is a combination of a live in-person event with a virtual online component, right? So I want to be very clear about this. I know that you all know what a hybrid event is, but let's go through hybrid, virtual, and live streaming. So with a virtual event, we're only virtual. So we're only on the screen. We are sitting and we're watching that event. Live streaming I put on here because it often gets interchanged with the word virtual event. A live stream is when you're just watching the event passively. There's no engagement for you as a participant or as someone who's watching that actual event. It's just that event is going on and you're a passive participant in the event. That's live stream. With a virtual event, I like to categorize that a little bit differently. A virtual event, we create the virtual event for a virtual audience. So the engagement is going to be different. It's not just sitting back passively watching the event that's happening. It's the people that are attending the virtual event have a say in the direction of the event, like now asking questions and different things like that. So I wanted to distinguish the difference between just live streaming virtually and a virtual event that we create in order to engage a virtual audience. And then hybrid, we're doing in-person with virtual. So that makes it a little bit tricky, right? So sometimes we think hybrid event, let's just have the event, like say we're at a hotel meeting room, and we're just going to live stream that event to people on Zoom or YouTube or whatever our platform is. That's not what we want to talk about today as far as a virtual event or in our hybrid event. We want to make sure that we're engaging people that are watching virtually, right? Makes sense? All right. All right, so what are the benefits, right, of hosting a virtual and live event? One of the big things that we're seeing with a lot of organizations is that we're able to increase the number of attendees that, that participate in the event, right? We have more access to speakers because we can still have them come in, or we can have them online and present that way, right? If you're into sustainable sort of things, a virtual event with a hybrid model is a wonderful way to be more green and be more environmentally friendly. We're not, using a bunch of food waste and different things like that. And of course, the location is convenient to most attendees because some of them, they can watch from their couch, they can watch from their home office, and they don't necessarily have to travel to Virginia Beach or wherever in order to participate in your event. And then also we have the ability to reshare or to rewatch the event. So if you record your event, attendees can see that in the future. You can also push that out to people who were unable to attend. I just recently did an event where we did a makeup session. So there's a lot of components you can do there as well. But there are lots of benefits for doing hybrid and virtual events that we didn't have with the in-person events. But then there are also challenges, right? So let's talk about the engagement and the attention span. What we're finding is we're not doing these long 8-hour days anymore. So you can go, say you go to a conference and you're there all day or multiple days. We can't do that anymore with virtual and hybrid events. We have to limit the number of hours that we put on our virtual event and include breaks if it's going too long. What we're finding is we're taking something like that's an all-day conference, about 8 hours, and we're condensing it into about 3 hours. We're finding that 3 hours is kind of like that sweet spot where people are not, where they can stay engaged and not get too distracted and things like that. And you still want to have a couple breaks in there in between. The content really, really, really drives your event. So this goes through with like messaging and things like that. Why would I attend your event? What's the value for me as an attendee? So the content here needs to be your driving force for getting registrations to your event, by letting potential members know what type of value they're going to glean from taking an hour or 3 hours out of their day to spend with you. Technology, this is a big one, right? So everyone is starting to kind of learn the technology. We know how to unmute ourselves and things like that. But if you have a speaker that you want for your virtual event, and they're joining from home to your hybrid or virtual audience, do they have the connection speeds that they need? Are they going to glitch and different things like that? So when we have different speakers, we will do what we call a speed test on their computers. We'll have them pull it up. We'll see what background they're using. We'll talk about lighting, different things like that. It's a fun little, pre-event chat, but we'll test out their computer speeds to make sure that it works well with what technology we're using. Different time zones. That's been a thing that normally we don't think about because we're all in person. It's like, hey, this is the time of the event. We make sure it's the best time we think for you, and then you come or you don't. With hybrid events, our last virtual event that I did, we had people from Hong Kong and different things like that because we're able to get a bigger audience. But we want to be able to take both types of locations into consideration. So if you have people from Hampton Roads, and let's say you have people from Hong Kong, if your membership is going to be taken from the Hampton Roads area, don't worry about changing your time zones or kind of like putting it in the middle of the times to make it convenient for those people outside Hong Kong, let's say California, we're 3-hour difference from them. Look at who your target is and make sure it's best for them. Also, we have the replay option. So those in California, they can get that replay if they want. And depending on the platform that you use, we've used platforms where when you jump in, for instance, like Zoom, if somebody joins now, they're joining in the middle, right? But if you use some other platforms like a StreamYard or something like that, when someone comes in, they can start at the very beginning of the event and watch all the way through. So depending on what you want to do and how you want to engage your participants, you can determine your platform based on how you want that attendee experience to go. If you need people to be engaging with you, then you probably want them to just you want to use a platform where they jump right in so that it's in real time. So another challenge, especially for hybrid, is your different locations, right? So you have to still treat your in-person audience and engage them well. But then also, it's like doing 2 events in one. Also, you want to make sure that you're extremely engaging with your virtual audience. So you're essentially planning 2 different events, right? We still want to have the superb customer service to those that are in person, but we also want to have someone who's monitoring. We want to have whatever we need for that virtual audience to be engaged as well. And that could be having someone else on your team answer those questions, engage in the chat feature, and we'll talk a little bit about some things that you can do there as well. Any questions on that? Feel free to type that in the chat if you have questions about challenges. All righty. So what's the most important thing to determine when hosting an event? So think through, why are you considering hosting this event? Can some other medium give you the engagement that you need? Are you advertising? Is an event the best way to engage with the members? And what purpose will it serve, right? And we want to be very clear with the value of what attendees are getting out of attending your event. This goes back to your messaging. When you're writing up your description for your event, we want to be as clear as possible. What is the value that an attendee is going to receive? This should not be ambiguous. If you go on something like an Eventbrite or Facebook events, you'll see a lot of events where they just expect you to know, because maybe you're part of that organization already and you kind of know these things. The acronyms are not spelled out. If I'm searching for this event, under a category, I'm not really sure what the event is about or how I'm going to get value out of it. So make sure that you're very, very clear with your messaging. Who is it for? What are they going to get? And what's your call to action? What do you want them to do afterwards? So thinking of your business objectives, what are those big, big goals that you want to achieve by having that event? And then we build backwards from there. So here are some of the top reasons that we have found that organizations are doing events. The number one is generating leads. And this is for kind of like this is for business organizations. So your associations, different things like that. This is not B2C, more B2B sort of thing for business purposes. Number two is brand awareness. Do I know who you are? When I see your logo, when I see the name of your organization, do I know what you can do to help me? Is it clear? Engaging prospects, like we talked about before, being very clear about how we want to engage the prospects, what value we'll add to those people, and then also education, right? Mark, any questions we have so far?
I think by now I know where the mute button is. Scott asked a question that we're going to hold a little bit towards the end. I think we're going to get to that. So I don't see any other questions pop in. So I think we're ready to keep rolling. And now and you also have me thinking about the PDCHR logo, because I think it just failed your test. So back to you.
I do see that a lot with where people are just putting acronyms. But the thing is, the logo's fine. It's that when you have that event description, spell out what that is, right? It needs to be clear, because we're attracting new members, right? So our current members know what it stands for, but new members may not know. So they may come across your event because you're advertising it very well, and they need to be able to tell immediately in the first part of the description, without even scrolling, what kind of organization is it, and what's in it for me, right? That WIFM. Am I going to get value out of this organization? Should I inquire more about this? So then let's talk about a little bit about attendee goals. What's the goal of the attendee? The number one goal we're finding right now, just in regular business events, is networking, right? So if a member of your organization wants to advance in their career, right? Maybe they need to meet somebody within that industry to help them get to the next step in their career. So networking is a really, really big one. And when we're talking about networking, think a little bit more outside the box, right? There is no box. So traditional networking, we throw people in a square room and we give them a name tag and some wine and beer, right? And we say, oh, go talk to a bunch of people or a bunch of strangers you don't know and things like that, right? That's the traditional thing. Wine, beer, here's your name tag. Rethink that a little bit. And especially with these virtual events and hybrid events, you can get away with so much more creativity, engagement here. So maybe you even poll people before the event and ask what type of networking they're looking at. Who do they want to get in front of, right? So if there are buyers and sellers, let's say, maybe you color code the buyers one color and the sellers another color. You know, if you have a virtual component, maybe when you break them up into rooms, you're putting people strategically in rooms and letting them know who's in the room, what they can get from this person, what this person is looking for, different things like that. So it's not like you're just going around talking to Tom, Dick, and Harry, hoping that you're networking with the right person and then trying to figure out how you can get out of the conversation once you learn that this person is not your ideal target. So think outside the box a little bit when it comes to networking. There are so many interesting and creative things. Like we did one where we put on the walls, like we had 4 different colors. There was a red zone, a yellow zone, blue zone, and a green zone. And based on what you wanted to get out of that networking session, you went to that corner or that area. And we had different like activities there and things like that. So you knew that you were in the right place and you were in front of the right person. So if that's one of the attendee goals, be super creative about that. Education, that's a big one as well. And with this, make sure that your messaging is clear. Like, what type of education are they getting? Be as specific as possible. In your head, you know what you're giving, but we don't know, right? So be as clear as possible with your messaging. And being clear with your messaging also allows people that don't know you to be clear on what value you're bringing. Entertainment, this is a fun one, right? And then recognition. So if you're recognizing people, we do this with like award ceremonies and different things like that. So those are some of the big goals there, especially networking and education. What questions, Mark? I saw a bunch come through.
Nah, that was me being rude and yattering in the background. Lisa, though, underscored one of your points there about, seeing an acronym, have to search and search and search and search and search for the organization,
Mhm.
figure out just what the heck they were up to.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've done that. I've seen acronyms and then I put it into Google and maybe it's not a really popular organization. So I have to scroll and try to figure out what this means and things like
Yeah.
that. And
It's
then that's
probably,
just
yeah,
time, right? So
right.
by the time, then that person's frustrated and then they leave and
We
they're
should
not
not
signing up for
depend,
your
yeah,
event.
we probably should not depend on prospective members or anybody else, prospective attendees. We shouldn't just depend on their perseverance to get here.
Right,
We shouldn't keep
exactly.
raising barriers. Guilty.
Yeah, we want to make it as easy as possible. Even when you're going to like your marketing and your websites and things like that. Back in the day with newspapers, we called it above the fold. So when you have the newspaper, it's folded over like this, like what's the most important stuff above the fold. Now with websites and things like that, we call it above the scroll. So how much do I have to scroll down to find your information? So I want the big bulk of your information before I even have to scroll. So give it to me, hit me with that right away. Here's a few other ways to deliver on attendee goals. Especially when it comes to virtual. You have your breakout rooms that you can utilize. Zoom is a great platform and they didn't have breakout rooms and things like that before, but there's a lot of platforms now with the pandemic and things like that that are adding a lot of these different tools and a lot of these different features. So do a little bit of research and see how you can make things fun and engaging, and breakout rooms is a really nice way to do that. If you do a breakout room, please make sure that you have a monitor for that room. So you're not just sending a group of people into the room and they're like, oh, what do we do for the next 5 minutes or whatever like that. Have somebody on your team that's monitoring those breakout rooms. If there's questions that need to be asked in order to prompt communication, have that all lined up and ready to go prior to the actual event. Chat rooms, similar. Sponsor halls. I'm sure you might have some questions about sponsorship and things like that we can talk through. But especially on virtual events, if you guys have been on any of these, there's sponsor halls, but you kind of like go into this room and there's really nothing to do there. You're just ready to get like a sales pitch, which is never really fun. So when you're thinking through sponsors and you do have a sponsor room or a sponsor hall, do something fun in there. Right? Is there something cool that they can get in that sponsor room? Make it engaging or make it very interesting for them to want to go and engage with those sponsors. So maybe there's a 5-minute video or presentation on something that they want to learn in there about the sponsor or how it ties into their goals. So don't just make it like a bland room where the sponsor is just pitching all the time. Make it interesting of what the sponsor is giving back to the attendees as well. Same with exhibitor halls. Gamification, this one's new with virtual. This could look something like, I get a certain amount of points for my activity during the event. So say I go and visit a sponsor hall, that might give me 5 points. If I go into a chat room or a networking room, that may give me another series of points. And then I can use those points in your store for some of your swag and different things like that. Right. So we can have gamification. We can make it really fun. You can announce who's at the top of getting points and different things like that. If they engage, or if you have a hot seat, somebody can get points that way as well. So there's some fun things that we can do with gamification. And most of us are a little competitive. So that kind of keeps it interesting and fun and engaging as well. Surveys. You can do that on your event. You can do that beforehand. And be strategic with the questions that you're asking, right? Don't just ask, what's your favorite color and things like that. I've seen some funny, quirky questions, and maybe you can throw one of those in there, but keep it value driven, right? So what do you need to know from that attendee, or what will push the event forward with your survey or poll? And file sharing. You can put that in a sponsor room. So if there's some sort of magnificent PDF that gives them a lot of information on a certain subject or a certain product, you can have them go into a sponsor hall to get that, or into a networking space in order to get that piece of information. And then file sharing in general, there's a lot of platforms where we can put files, we can put presentations and things like that, so the attendees have access to that as well. And then your question and answer stuff, so that you know that you're going in like the right direction.
Hey, Deanie,
Yes.
before you pop off the slides, Lisa had a great question about applications to support gamification.
Yeah, I'll go through that a little bit. So I'm going to talk through kind of like some different levels, and you'll see one in there, and I will suggest some different applications that you can use. Anything else?
All yours.
Okay, cool. All right, so many different types. Can you guys do a chat for me again? What is your next event? Your next event, is it a webinar? Is it a conference? Is it a fundraiser? Type that in real quick so I can see. And Mark, let me know what's in there, because I can't really see.
Let's see
What's your next event? Is it educational? Someone said before fundraiser. Go ahead and type that in so we can touch on some of those.
So Valeria's got a virtual well-being event. Tammy's got a meeting coming up. Ben's got a monthly meeting, which includes an annual award recognition. So it's a quote unquote dinner, virtual roundtable of sorts, which is actually what PDCHR's got coming up in a month. Series of interviews with grant applicants. Geez, Deborah, I need to get on that list. More educational. Lisa's doing a 1-hour virtual talk about developing mental fitness. I can't wait to hear that.
Oh, that's going to be great. Wonderful.
I think is that the one you're doing for me? So yeah, so there's a pretty broad spectrum there: meetings, education, celebration, whole bunch of shuns.
Yeah. So at first we thought we couldn't do a lot of events virtually, right? We're like, well, does this type of event fit a virtual or hybrid model? But there's so much we can do as long as we're willing to be creative. So definitely push forward on that, but start thinking outside of the box about how we can make it creative, how we can make it more engaging. Do you need to send things to participants in advance that they can open on the actual event, different things like that, so we can make it fun. All right, there's the platforms. So let's talk through a little bit of this, and I think this will answer part of Deborah's question. All right, so there's about, I guess, 4 different levels I like to say. So we have the big, most robust one that you've seen, like something like a Tony Robbins would do. All the screens are behind him or something like that. This is for conferences. You have a lot of breakout rooms, different tracks, things like that. So that's your kind of like your top of the line. Then you have your smaller ones like a webinar, where we're presenting a PowerPoint presentation. We're able to share files and different things like that. Then going a step down is just our general meetings, where Zoom works well and things like that. And then the 4th component is our live streaming. So we're going to talk a little bit through each of these. And if you have questions about these, throw it in the chat or unmute and ask. All right, so the first one, your full event management platform. This is the big ones, and these are a little pricey. They can be. So some of the examples of that that you can do for virtual is Meeting Play. That's a big platform. We have Intrado. Cvent is another big one. Expo Pass is one that I've used recently with much success. But look at these features here. So these are all built into these bigger conferences and trade shows and seminars. You have your virtual lobby. You have exhibitor rooms. You can do gamification within that. So Deborah, note these here with the gamification that's kind of built in. File sharing, video playback, and things like that. So it can look something like this, or you can get it created however you want it to look. But as you can see that there's different areas that you can kind of like go into. So if you want to go into an auditorium where you're actually seeing the keynote speaker and things like that, you can go into that section. If you just want to engage with the sponsors, you can go into the exhibit hall. Information, your event concierge can be there to answer people's questions and things like that. So it doesn't have to be the Brady Bunch Zoom sort of look. It can be fun and engaging like this, where you go into the auditorium, you see the keynote, but at any time you can leave and go into a networking hall and different things like that. So this is a little out of the box and a little different than our general Zooms. So those are your big, robust platforms. Here's one of the examples that I put on there, Meeting Play. This is a really good one that does virtual events. And you can tack this on with your hybrid model so that people in person are in person, but you're actually engaging with your virtual audience on this platform. And as you can see, people can go into these different rooms and different things like that. You have your dashboard. You see right here, it says swag store. You can use your bucks, or your points in there to get things, the promotional items from your store and different things like that. So here's polls. There's a lot that you can do within this platform. This is just a picture of how it looks on different devices. So your laptop, your phone, and we're finding that people are joining from a multitude of different devices. So you want to make sure it's compatible with not just desktop. Here is a good example of what a hybrid event could look like, right? So you have that person that's actually in person. Let's say we're at the Main, downtown Norfolk, right? So this person is in person, but we can see the virtual audience. And then we also have chairs off for our hybrid audience. So we're engaging with our virtual audience as well as our in-person audience. So you see how it says like audience question, you can pull up someone virtually, or if there's someone actually in the room, they can just ask their question like that, take the mic over to them or however you like. Let me show you a quick picture of an event we just finished a couple weeks ago at the Hilton to Norfolk, the Main. This is a virtual event, but I'll show you how you can do it with a hybrid as well. So see this picture here? See how much space is on the floor there? That's usually where we'd have all the chairs and stuff lined up, right? But this was strictly virtual. So there's two stages. One stage was for the MC, and one stage was for the other speakers. And we were trying to keep people spaced out as far as possible. So this was about 3 weeks ago. So we could still pretty flowers and all that sort of stuff on the stage, but there was no in-person audience. And now for your hybrid events, we'd have a small in-person audience, but this is somewhat like how it could possibly look. Any questions about that? I'll flip through a couple of these first, but if you want to unmute yourself. Here's our camera crew in the back, our AV techs. So you see no people, no audience there. Nobody's there, just the speakers, the MC, the audio techs. There's the two stages. This is a guy here in the blue. His name is Carl Fussman. He's a, New York Times bestseller. He was Larry King's like BFF or something. They would have breakfast every morning. So he's someone we had to like pay, right? But instead of just having him on his Zoom, he was okay with actually coming to the Main and being on this stage. Now you can see how far away he is from the MC and things like that. So we made it extremely safe for him to be there as well. Here's just a couple more pictures of stuff. And you can always look at this on my Facebook page also.
How many hours of the day did this session go, like start and end time?
So this was an event for Virginia Maritime Association, and this was a fundraiser. So whoever said that they wanted to do fundraising, this was an hour-long event, 1 hour, that is it. And so Virginia Maritime Association turned 100 years old. This event was an event that we did postpone due to COVID. That's why it says 2020 in the background there. So they turned 100 in 2020. And then we had the event in February, right before the 101st year started. But we tied it in with a fundraiser. The organization was Virginia Federation of Food Banks. So it was the food bank system. It was 7 different food banks throughout Virginia, Richmond, different things like that. They serve over 1 million people in our community. And the goal was to raise $100,000 The last event I did, the goal was to raise $100,000 also. So people just love that wonderful round big number. So for this event with the $100,000 goal, we raised 104 and 625, I believe. So we exceeded the goal, which was really great. Here's just a picture of our stages and the big empty-ish room. And then we streamed it live.
Dina, a couple questions popping in.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
So Kenneth asked, what determines the type of venue when it's virtual? It seems like a lot of space for a few people.
What determines the type of space?
Well, the type of venue you select when you're putting on a virtual event like this. If I could maybe kind of repurpose that question. It's like, when do you know that you need to be looking for a big space to put on something virtual as opposed to a more intimate space?
Right. So with your hybrid, so today we're talking specifically about hybrid, right? Of course, a virtual comes in with that. But with hybrid, how many people are you going to allow to be in person? And so that would determine it. And you do need to cap that, right? A lot of times with just our regular in-person events, like just as many people as possible, when we figure it out later. But with the hybrid, now that we want to be safe and all that sort of stuff, maybe you limit it to 30 people. Right now, we're not going over like 100 people necessarily. But if you do want 100 people in person, now you're going to have to think about safety precautions. Pre-COVID, we could maybe have one section of a ballroom, right, for 100 people. Or maybe, let's say, yeah, you could fit 100 people in one section, maybe two. But now, because you don't want to put 10 people at a table or anything, we have to spread out. So now we have to buy a second or third portion of the ballroom to spread everybody out. Tables, we have, 10 feet apart. We don't want to cram the tables. So we're talking like 3-4 people per table, right? So that increases the size that you'll need. So first of all, determine how many people you want in person, and then that will determine what type of venue you need.
A couple other things. Yeah, I bet you this is on a lot of people's mind. Denise, noted that there's an awful lot of sophisticated looking camera and audio and all that other gear, and probably pretty pricey. So do you really need all that to put on an event?
Yes and no, right? So if you're wanting to do something like this, then yes, because we had like a 3-camera setup. We did have 2 stages. Those are spread out, different things like that. So and we're raising over $100,000 for these organizations. So it was in the budget to be able to do that. If you don't want a stage or something if you want, say you don't do it in the ballroom, say you just use one of the side meeting rooms and you have like 10 people in person, and then you have the rest of your audience is virtual, then just get one of the small rooms. Your 10 to 20 people can still be spaced out. You might necessarily need more than 1 camera, right? This was a 3-camera setup. Like you see the governors there and everything. And he sent that in as a video. He was the only person, the only speaker that was not actually there. So you may just need that 1 camera, but you'll need to, feed it into whatever online component you're using, whether that's a StreamYard, Meeting Play, Expo Pass, anything else like that. So if you make it smaller on your hybrid side in person, you won't need as much, but it just depends on like the overall goal of your event.
So one other quick question then, and I think we'll move on. Ben, great curious question. VMA already pay for the venue? Is that why you had to use it?
That's a great question. So yes, for this one specifically, because the event was postponed due to COVID, the venue was already nailed down. But we can talk about like how to write up, the clauses and things like that when you're signing the contract. We put stuff in the contract so we could get out of it if need be. But so we stayed with the same venue because we had credits, and we used that for like food for our staff and other different components. We were able to do more things with the stage, the uplighting and such like that. So it just depends.
Got it. Thanks, Dave.
But yeah, for this one, we did already planned to be at the main, and so we just kept it. But there is a clause in there where we could have gotten out of it if we needed to.
Thanks.
Next question.
Nope, we're all set.
Okay. All right. Okay. So that's kind of like the high level, right? So next we have our general webinars. And I love Zoom. I would recommend Zoom for a smaller organization. You don't need to go super, super big. Just get a platform that fits your needs. If you don't need all this exhibit hall and breakout rooms and all this sort of stuff, well, Zoom has breakout rooms as well, but if you don't need all the bells and whistles, just use something like a Zoom. You could do a GoToWebinar, Webinar Jam. There's a lot of different options here. So find a platform that fits your needs and make sure that you're not paying for extra bells and whistles that you're not going to utilize. The next one, general meetings. You could use, of course, your Google Hangouts, GoToMeeting. You're able to do your PowerPoint presentations just like this, present videos, have your chat rooms and such. So there's some examples of places that you can do that's kind of like a step down from the bigger, robust platforms. And then you're live streaming, right? So if you decide not to go hybrid and have to rent out, well, you could still rent out places, but if you decide to just keep it as virtual, you have a lot of options now. Facebook, you have Vimeo, Instagram has a live now, Facebook, LinkedIn has a live. I don't believe that everybody can do that. You have to kind of like apply for theirs, but I'm sure in a couple of months it'll be available to everyone. You have your API integrations. You can put it straight on your website. So the ones that I've done, people don't have to go to YouTube or anything like that. They go to the homepage of the organization and we put the hyperlink in there so they can click play right on that homepage of the organization. And so that's the link that we'll push out in our promotions. Any questions about that?
Good to go.
All right, so most of what we want to do is attract our members, and this is how we're kind of like doing it with a hybrid or virtual event. So I wanted to briefly touch on kind of like our ideal attendee. I wanted to talk a little bit about this because I find a lot that we want everybody to kind of come to our event, and I want to kind of narrow that down a bit more to say, who is that ideal person, right? Yes, we want everybody to be a part of our organization, but that's not helping the rest of the people in the organization or in the association. So we want to make sure that we are hitting those right people. So when you're doing your promotions, right? Where is that ideal member? Where do they live, work, and play? What kind of other networking events are they part of? You know, if I wanted to bump into your ideal member, where would I go? You know, are they reading the newspaper or are they getting their news Facebook? You know, things like that. So now we know where to spend our marketing dollars. So one of my quotes, I always say, you can sell to everybody, but you can't market to everybody, right? So narrow down on what your ideal member looks like, what they need from you. So this is going to go along with your messaging and letting them know what value you provide. This is so important. It sounds very simple, but we need to niche down on this in a very serious way. So think about that person. You know, who is it? Where do they live, work, and play? What kind of organizations are they part of? When we're doing Facebook ads and things like that, we can create a lookalike audience. So I can say, my members like this sort of thing, and I can look at another organization and say, okay, I want to kind of like mimic that, or I have an audience that came to my event before, and now I want Facebook to find new potential members that look similar to the members that attended my event. So being specific on what our attendees look like and what our ideal members look like, now our advertising dollars are going to work better for us because we're being very, very targeted. This is a little aside. So know what your members want, know how you can help them, right? Don't give crackers to Cookie Monster sort of thing. All right, let's talk a little bit about promotion, because this always comes up a bit. So how can you promote your event? You want to get it out there. You want people to know about it. So you have your social media. And as I'm going through this, think about what I said, like, where are they? So if you're using a younger audience, maybe Instagram will skew a little bit younger. Right now it's getting much older, but in, 5 years ago, there was only, Gen Z and Gen X and things like that on Instagram. Right now it's expounded much, much more. But there are other things like Twitch and all these other platforms that have the users look different, right? So look at where you're going to advertise, and do your members get their information from that platform? Like, offline, you have your posters, you have your phone calls. You can even do phone calls where, if you have those people's numbers, or you have your members that have been to events before and you want them to come to a new event, where you can call them and it'll automatically it won't ring their phone, and it'll automatically throw a message into their voicemail. And you record that message once, and it's kind of like an auto dial thing, and it just throws it in there. So they'll see that they have a message, but you're not actually ringing their phone, interrupting their day or anything. So there's a lot of cool tools out there. Articles, forums, blogs, your traditional things like TV, radio, your Google AdWords. When we're targeting new people, we'll do a lot on Facebook and LinkedIn. If you do that sort of thing, make sure that you are setting your audience. So instead of just boosting an ad, go in and go through the toggles and things like that and pick what you want your audience to look like. You can use demographics. So I can say, I just want people in Hampton Roads, or I just want people who live in 23320, right? Or 23510, which is Norfolk. The 23320, that's Chesapeake. You can niche that far down. Or you can say Virginia Beach and with a 20-mile radius, things like that. Also, age is a big factor. What's the age of your participants? Maybe it's not 18, so you want to kind of toggle that over to 30 to 50 or 40 to 65. Don't just let it go to anybody that may not be ideal for your organization and your association. Okay, so I'm kind of wrapping up here. So I have a slide before the event, during the event, and after the event. So type in the chat box which one of these things you want me to touch a little bit on. What have I not covered? What do you want more information on?
Importance of date and time would be interesting, because should the event be in the daytime or at night? That'd be interesting to hear your viewpoint on that one.
Yeah. So with this, the first thing I would do is check competing events. So if there are other organizations or associations or groups that have a similar event to you, like say you're doing a spring fling or whatever, check other organizations and make sure that you're not stepping on each other's toes if your audience looks similar, right? So that's with your dates and things like that. Consider holidays. And not just like, 4th of July or your traditional holidays. Consider things like back to school. Is it parents? Are they going to be affected by that? COVID, we're a little bit different now, but, think of those things. When do people eat dinner? Maybe you don't want to have it at 7 o'clock at night, and maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon is better for those members. And then consider the best time for your industry as a whole. So that's going back to knowing members, and even surveying and polling people can give you an idea of what would be ideal for them. Next one.
Well, actually, Deanie, there's a couple that popped up here. Neil suggested pre-event, or is curious about pre-event questionnaires. Lisa, a little bit more maybe on the gamification apps that are available. Yeah, lots of stuff happening here.
So with the gamification apps, Lisa, it's not going to be a separate app. So when you're planning the virtual portion of your event, it depends on what type of gamification that you want, and that's how you're going to pick the virtual platform. So there's not a separate. It needs to be integrated with whatever platform you pick. So I showed an example before of Meet and Play. They have gamification as an option there. Some Some platforms you may have to pay extra for that, but it's not going to be a separate app. It's going to be whatever platform that you pick. So look at something like Meeting Play, Expo Pass. You can even look at Cvent, CVENT, things like that, and make sure that they have an application within their virtual platform to support your gamification.
Just a little on that. So I attended a great big 3-day virtual event all about virtual events. So it wasn't particularly hybrid, but still gamification was a big part of that. They created basically in WordPress a dashboard. So that was actually your entry point and exit point to the Zoom that was behind it. And that's where the gamification happened. And for them, and I can't remember the name, I'll look it up. It was a module that, or a plugin rather. So I'll take a look at it. So that was another approach. I can't remember what it was though.
Yeah, there's some things that you can, and so you got to make sure that the whatever virtual platform that you pick, that you can do a plugin if you want to do it like that. And so then you need to determine whether you want to use a platform that has it built in or whether you can plug it in, but make sure it works together.
Right.
You know, because you have your technology things. Now you could do gamification separately and have them go to another page that's separate from your event and things like that. But you don't want to distract people too much once you let them leave your page and that section. If they go somewhere else, now it's like, oh, here's a ding from my Facebook, and then they're paying attention to that. So I like keeping the gamification on that same platform. So whether it's an integration or like a plugin, make sure that it works simultaneously within, synchronously within that platform.
Deanie?
Yes.
I also attended a virtual event the beginning of the year, and they used a name wheel, and that's how they gave out their door prizes in between. So as people, I guess, joined the event, their name was added to the wheel, and then the wheel would like spin and pick somebody's name, and that's who won for that particular whatever.
Great. So our event before last, we did one for Mediterranean Shipping Company, and we gave away a cruise, a 7-day, 7-night cruise. And so we did a wheel as well. But how I did that was I was sharing my screen, so I could toggle between, because it was on a separate platform, but I was in charge of it, right? So the participants had nothing to do with that, right? So they weren't using a separate app or anything like that. I just entered the names into that wheel, and then I went to that screen, and then I hit the button to make the wheel spin and all the fun and, you know, confetti and all that sort of stuff. But I was in charge of that. I wasn't asking the participants to go to a separate, use a separate tool or enter their name into the wheel or anything. We entered people's names as when they registered initially. So if you came in that day and you didn't register, your name was not going into the wheel for that big grandiose prize. Thanks for that, Tammy.
Denise asked about how do we find the apps. You'd mentioned one that will drop a voicemail on your behalf. Is there? I think I may have missed. Is there? You got a name for that, or is there? Or types of apps, or is that a, we'll get back to you?
That's it's something box. I'm trying to remember what it is. I haven't used it lately. Just do a Google search and you should find that one and maybe some other examples of that.
Yeah. I'll
if
talk
I
to
remember,
Deanie
Mark,
after.
I'll give it to you in the resources.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Everybody on Friday will receive an email. Thank you for being here, et cetera, as well as a link to a resources page. So Deanie, I'll do a little homework.
Yeah, I'll put that
on.
on there. Yeah, it's something box. Oh, I can't remember it now. Yep. Okay. All right, let's go to during the event. Put in the chat which one would be interesting for you to know about here. So we have our registration. What information do you need to collect? Start thinking through what you want to know about that attendee. If it's during, we want to ask this before and also during. So if there are additional things that you want to know during the event. This is also where your event concierge can come into play, where you have kind of like a little introduction to how the event is going to go from the event concierge. If they have any trouble with technology, they know how to get in touch with that person in order to help them out. We've had to do this a lot, especially in the early days of virtual, because people were just not familiar with the platform. So we had someone showing them, okay, you can't connect here, whatever like that, click this, click that. And that happened prior and during for those who didn't do it prior. All right, I saw one come in. What is that, Mark?
Actually, so there's two came in from Scott and Ben. So Scott, can you unmute yourself? I'm not sure I can interpret your question quite right.
What have you tried during events that hasn't worked?
That hasn't worked?
Yeah.
Opening the mic to participants.
Okay, that's a good one. Thank you for that, that
Scott.
nudge, Mark. We were doing a virtual event and we wanted anybody to come, right? Because we were raising money for, this was last month. We were raising money for Operation Smile, and their goal was $100,000 again, right? So, you know how like if you work in an organization, you can put a portion of your salary to whatever their thing is. Like when I worked at Pilot Media, ours was United Way. So you could put like 5% or whatever of your check. Mediterranean Shipping Company, this is a global organization, all their people, their organization was Operation Smile. But how they were doing that was with golf tournaments and things like that. And so because we weren't able to do any of that with COVID, we created this virtual event to try to raise that $100,000, which we would have raised during the year. We raised $120,000 before the event even began. So there's some strategy with that. And then at the end, we raised over $250,000 for Operation Smile. But there was an event before that where we kept it open and we put the link out there publicly and we did not require registrations. And somebody came in and it was like this recording or something. And it was just like spewing out these random things and you could hear it. And we're like, what is that? Like, you know, like they didn't come in and mute. So that's one of the things that I guess was not ideal, but then we had controls. So we just clicked that person off. Actually, we kicked them out completely because it was like some rhetoric or something. It was like a recorded message, something like that. So we do have a little bit of that, but we were able to, and we didn't just mute them, we kicked them out completely. So.
Deanie, I'm going to ask Ben to go ahead and unmute himself and ask his question too there as well. So Ben.
Yeah, I was asking how you may have attendees interact with each other independently.
On virtual or like in person, the hybrid portion?
In a virtual event.
Independent from.
So you don't have a moderator directing it, but you have lots and lots of breakout rooms that are you know, dynamically created.
So how do you have them interact? So with that, I don't know why I would want them to interact individually like that. I'm not sure if I see a purpose for that, right? So if they're networking, I want them to go in and I want them to specifically have a job to do. The only way that I would kind of like allow that to happen is in the beginning of the event where I was showing you those pictures of there's a lobby. So you can kind of go in there and kind of like chat it up beforehand. But when people are on, I want to dictate what they're doing and what they're not doing. So I want to be in control. So just kind of letting people go rogue is not something that I would do, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The model I'm thinking of is let's say a virtual dance social. So the DJ just plays the music, and then you want the people to interact on their own. But that's off topic.
Yeah, no, you could do that. Like you could just have everybody turn their videos on. I have a partner where he does this dance thing at the very beginning to kind of like get people to get their energy. And what he does is he gives away money, right? So he's like, okay, everybody like get up and let's see who's like, you know, dancing, and he'll play the music. And so like they'll play like 2 or 3 songs just like in the beginning and things like that. And he's like, okay, who's ready? And different things like that. He's like, okay, $20. Well, he gives it like $100, but and then he'll pull up on the screen that person dancing, and then he'll kind of like give prizes like that. So you can still have them do that independently, but you're still kind of moderating it. You're telling people when to dance, how hard to dance, what they get if they do a great job dancing, you know, that sort of thing. So you're still in charge. I don't want to give away any like power here.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Cool.
Just one more thing, Ben, that really caught my ear on this was you're talking about the breakout rooms. So I'm putting in the chat box a link to something called the exchange approach, and this is like a free 1 hour and a half. It's not really a sales pitch, but it is at the end about managing conversations, and it really focuses on breakout rooms. So it's pretty cool, and basically the way to be successful or get something useful out of breakout rooms, if we're problem solving or working on issues or stuff like that, is being very specific and positive with the question that the people are going to tackle, plus a methodology for how they should go about and self-organize. Like, all right, so the person with the longest hair is described the person with the shortest hair, always me. You go first, and then clarity on what we're going to do with that information the moment you come out. So that's really cool. I mean, if you really want to up the game on breakouts, particularly like for building collective wisdom, this is a really great resource to check out.
Cool. Yeah, with the one that I was just telling you about, they did like the shortest hair. So then that person, so it's not even, you still have your moderator, but you let the attendees kind of do it as well. And so they said, person with the shortest hair, you're kind of like the moderator, and here's what you do. So we're giving the participants kind of like that onus as well. So any other questions on after the event? Make sure you share things so that you are letting people know what actually went on. You have your recorded sessions and things like that. Don't just during the event, when that event is over, that's not the end of your event, right? Usually we're like, oh, the event is over. We walk out of the place and we're like, okay, we're done. But that's not the event. The event is when you finish your follow-up strategy. So whatever that is. Make sure that you're sharing your things. Make sure you can be teasing stuff. You can show off pictures of your event. You can put all this on your social media platforms and things like that. You can write a case study about it. You can write a post-event press release, right? So we raised money for like the food bank. We could say, this is what we did. This is how we did it. This is why it's awesome, things like that. So your event doesn't end just when the clock strikes end of the event. Make sure your follow-up strategy is also engaging members and potential members as well.
Hey, Dina, there's 2 questions I didn't catch before we moved off during the event, but it's fine where we are now right now. So actually both of these questions are about outside, about doing this stuff outside. Or actually associated with outside in general. So Patricia asked, thoughts about how do we do this? How do we produce this when the event is outside because of AV and audio and visual tech challenges? And then then I'll follow that up with a similar the other side of the coin question from Carolyn. So challenges for AV or for outdoor events.
Yes. So with outdoor events, I would say still have some sort of stage, still have that anchor of your event. So say it's outside, like we do a concert series and we have a gazebo, right? So all of our power runs up the pole within that gazebo. It's kind of like we attach it to a little pole thing or whatever, right? So, but it's still under a covered area. Now the people that are attending, now they're out in the sun or whatever, but our equipment is under the little gazebo thing. So we're plugging up under there and things like that. So just as long as you have kind of like a station for you, then you should still be fine as long as it's not raining. So I've done plenty of outdoor stuff without a problem with the big technology. Just have a covered area, make sure your AV techs know what's going on, and kind of troubleshooting from there. So don't, and then a lot with COVID, we're finding that a lot of people are much more okay with doing things outside than inside. So you still want to have your separation and still want to do your safety and everything like that. But people feel when they're enclosed, like, we're breathing each other's air or something. So outdoor events, I feel, are going to come back stronger at first than indoor events. So just make sure that you have your stage or your section that's covered, and then plug up through there, and you can still have your cameras and things like that. So go for it.
And the other side of the coin question is from Carolyn, who's curious about event attendance. Specifically, are people going to not want to attend virtual and hybrid events because the weather's nice outside?
That's just like with any event that you do, right? So that has nothing to do really with COVID or pre-COVID or anything like that. The goal here is to make your event sound so amazing that they get FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. So when working on that messaging, saying this is why you must attend this event, you can even say that the recording will not be available. You have to be on this live to get this information. We're not going to push it back out and things like that. And so, yeah, give them a little of that fear of missing out sort of thing. But when you're clear with that ideal attendee, that ideal member, and you speak directly to the value that they want to get, then they're going to be there. You just have to make your events as awesome as possible to where that person knows that they can't miss it.
All right, I think we're ready to roll. I think we've cleared our question bank.
Okay, cool. This is the second to last slide. I just want to briefly touch on your 2021 calendar. So my big thing is the strategy, right? So it's not just throwing a party to throw a party or doing an event just to do an event. What's the strategy behind it? And I have a whole educational thing that I do specifically just about the event calendar. So don't just plan your next event. I want to see what you're going to do for the next 365 days, right? So say it's January 1st. Are you going to have one big annual event? Are you going to have an event every quarter? What's that mix of events? So maybe one networking event every quarter, but then you still have your big annual event or your summer event. And then what's the goal for each of these events? So if you look and you say, oh, my networking event is not what many people want, then change it so that you can give your audience what they really, really want so that they attend, and that whatever your goal is for putting on that event can come out the other side, and then it will go along with your business objectives, right? So be very strategic on what type of event you're doing, why you're doing the event, what's the goal of each of your events, and how you're going to follow up with those potential members. So don't think of just one-off. Think of your whole calendar of events. And that you can have some buying power there too. So say you need, say you're going to do this event at the Hilton, Norfolk, the Maine, right? And you know you're going to do it 3 times this year. Now I can go and I have negotiation power. I'm not just saying, hey, give me this room for 1 time. I'm saying I want to sign a contract for 3 times. Now I'm getting a discount. Now I can negotiate better and things like that. So that's one example of the types of benefits that you can have with that negotiation power, knowing what your whole event calendar looks like. So this is extremely, extremely important. Look at the whole year, not just the next event, and making sure that your goals are tied to each of those events, and that your strategy is well done. All right, so basically to reiterate, have a clear objective. It's your big goal. Determine your ideal attendee. What kind of members do you want? Where do they eat, work, play? If I want to bump into them, where do I go? What chat rooms, what networking events, what places, what organizations? And then pick the event that's going to add the most value to them, whether it's education, networking. Then promote your event and engage with your attendees, and engage before, during, and after the event. So engagement in before could be your phone calls, your emails, your email series, things that you put on social media, teasers from your last event, fun pictures, things like that. And then make sure you're capturing all the information that you need from the attendee. Do you need to know where they work? Do you need to know their phone number? Do you need to know their email address? So you have determined your strategy. So you know now my strategy, my follow-up strategy is going to contain a series of emails, like email marketing. So I know I need their email address. Do I need their actual physical address? And am I sending them a fun box before the actual event? So make sure that you're very clear on that. And then implement your follow-up strategy so that you're enticing these people who are not yet members to continue or to get more information about your organization in order to become members.
Wow, that's awesome. And it
All
actually,
right. If there's any other questions, that's all I have for now.
well, so there's one question and it just completely ties into this list here. Scott had asked earlier, but I told him we were going to hold till the end here. Scott asked if, if there's a shareable checklist for doing virtual events or hybrid events, or do we just have to hire you?
Yeah, you can just hire me. I do consultations as well. And so if there's anybody that wants to talk to me specifically about their event, because it's so wide, right? What one person needs, another person may not need all those bells and whistles and things like that. But the checklist, it's really the same. It's very similar to your normal event checklist. The only thing that's really changing is the venue, right? So instead of having it at a big ballroom, you're now having to pick what that venue is going to be, whether it's going to be your YouTube or your Zoom or your meeting play or your C-Vent or your Intrado, right? That's the big portion. So you can use any event planning list and then just change that portion out. AV, you're still going to have to go down that list just like you do with an in-person event. So the big thing that's changing is that venue and then how you put it out on the platform to your attendees.
Let's see how, let's come up here. So Lisa had a question about budgets or options that you have for virtual event planning or strategy for small business owners. And
What,
sounds
say
like
that
might
first
be
part again?
budgets or options do you have for virtual event planning or strategy help for small business owners, which I think was the consultation you were just mentioning.
Yeah, so what I would do is sit down with you. We talk about what events that you wanted to do, and then we kind of reverse engineer it. So say you're going to charge people a fee to attend your event. Before we even figure out what that fee is, because we like to just throw out these numbers like $25 or whatever like that. Like, what's your upsell? Like, what do people pay for becoming a member? And how long are they usually members for? So we see what's the lifetime value of that prospect, and then we kind of reverse engineer it from there. That if we get, our goal is to get X number of members from this event, so now our budget can be X, Y, and Z, right? And now we need to charge them, maybe it's not $25, maybe it's $28, right? In order to re-engineer that budget. Maybe instead of flowers on every table of the hybrid place, we know that we can't afford $500 worth of flowers. Now we need to just do balloons or something different, right? Some little votives and things like that. So it's all about reverse engineering it. And that's why we need to know our end goal, because knowing our end goal, we know that we need X number of members. These members are going to pay this much or do this sort of thing, or our budget that we have for our nonprofit is this. And so that's how we kind of determine what our overall budget is.
So there's one last question there in the chat box. And it's from Valeria. It says, how would you audit a virtual event? I'm not entirely certain, Valeria, what you're asking. So maybe you could unmute yourself and clarify that.
Hi, it's like some kind of checklist to determine how successful is an event.
So
okay, so a
ultimately
checklist, so a post-event
checklist for the event. That's for you to create, right? So in general, there's a standard checklist, but it goes back to the goal, right? So your checklist is going to look different from Ben's. It's going to look different from Scott's, because what Scott's doing is not what you're doing, right? So you have to tell me, what is your goal? Is your goal to raise $100,000, right? Scott's is just to get people to come to church, this number of people or whatever it may be. So we start with that goal. When the event is done, what do you want to have? Do you want to have 20 new members? And then we go back and say, here's the things we need to do in order to make that happen. So you're going to be in charge of what that goal is, and therefore your checklist needs to be constructed based on that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, this has been fantastic. I love how many people signed up for it. I love how many people showed up for it. I love how many people are still here with us. So speaking of measures of success, we've hit, like 3 of my top 5 just with that. Even though Scott just called me out by saying just showing up should not be a goal. Speak for your church. I'm speaking for me, Scott. That's just the way it is here.
Also,
Hey,
Mark, with virtual events, we have a lot of things on the back end, right? So we know how many people have attended. I can have a special link for each person. So when they do show up, that kind of like prompts me to know that sort of stuff. When the event is over, I can start sending out my emails. I can send out my surveys and things like that. So there's a lot of analytics, even to answer Valeria's question. There's a lot of analytics that you will get within your platform, so that you can kind of like go back in and say, okay, how many people attended? How many people did this? How many people signed up for a consultation? How many people did XYZ? How many people are asking for more information on becoming a member? All that sort of stuff.
Right.
So
As
the
long as you
analytics
know
on the
all
back
those,
end of the system.
right. As long as you know all the things that you want to gather are being covered and you have them in place beforehand. I had to ask a couple people today. I say, hey, is it okay if we share your name and email address with others? Because that was a question I added later after they registered to Eventbrite. So anyways, I just want to say, thanks again so much, Deanie, for, giving your, sharing your time and talent with the fellow community leaders here. I've got a favor to ask of everybody, he said, referring to the chat box. So I just, for those of you who still have a second, and we'll stay here as long as you want, but please click on that first link. And it's not rude if you do that while I'm talking, but please fill out our survey. It's like 4 questions. You should be, back in a minute, and just helps us build, even more incredible events for you and your colleagues and peers in the future. Next month, so a month from today, Wednesday, at 6 p.m. next quarter, we move to the evenings. There's a free roundtable about marketing and communications. So if you're interested in that, please come with that. It's really more of a structured discussion with your peers about what's working, what's challenging, stuff like that. Those are actually kind of fun. And then super big plug that I hinted at before is that last link. We have our annual leadership symposium coming up. It's the evening of Thursday and Friday, April 29th and 30th. And then a good chunk of the day, May 1st, a Saturday. And Lisa's going to be there, and she's going to be talking. So thanks, Lisa. And I'll be there, but I won't be talking nearly as much. So we'll hold this open for a little bit. Friday, as I mentioned before, you'll get an email, a follow-up with how to connect with Deanie, PDF of her presentation, some other resources that we had talked about. But the last thing I want to do is there was a comment that came up. I can't remember right now who asked it about, boy, isn't all that stuff complex for putting in a hybrid event? And this is why I kind of love virtual events. I want to show you guys what my technical stack looks like. And I will accept absolutely no comments about the condition of my desk. I love my IKEA corner desk, and I don't care that the finish is coming off. But this is all there is that I'm using to help put on and produce all these PDCHR events. There's a ring light up here, so I look beautiful, but you can't see me doing that. This is actually a camcorder. I hadn't found a single webcam that I liked, so I found it was a couple $100 for this camcorder. That it's neat because the monitor flips around, so I can see what's going on, and you can see my green screen. Just a big old Mac here, and a microphone that you probably didn't see, but I'm talking right over it. And it really improves the quality. And then stuck over here on the left is what I use to light up this side of my face, and it's a cheap little lamp from Amazon. I went through a lot of them, but what I'm trying to demonstrate is, you can put on events that look pretty cool like this. Virtual events. I mean, I'm not inviting people in my house to do this hybrid event, but you can do virtual events with a pretty cheap tech stack, if you will. I think this whole thing, not including the computer, of course, probably, $200-300 or about $400 tops, and an analog camera, analog clock in the bottom right corner.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. I love your setup. Yeah, if you guys are just sticking with the virtual model, there's a lot of very simple and cheap things that you can do. But when you're going into hybrid, specifically with what we're talking about today, then yeah, you need to have your in-person stuff and your virtual stuff. So it's a lot more, but with just virtual, you can get away with some a very simple setup, which is really good as well.
All right. Well, again, thanks, Deanie. Thanks everybody for being in attendance. We're going to hang out here, just for a few more minutes. If you got anything, or I'm going to hang out here. I'm not making anybody else. I'll hang out here if you got any questions about PDCHR, what we talked about today. And if you want to wave goodbye, here's a good time to turn on your camera, even if you haven't all along, so we can just see your smiling face once. But if you don't, that's okay too. There
So
we go.
question for Deanie.
Please.
When did business event planning pick up again, or were you able to pivot in March to virtual events pretty quickly? Tell me about the last 9 months of your business.
Yeah, so there was a dip, right? It's a zombie apocalypse, right? We didn't know what was happening. So of course, yeah, things slowed way down. And what happened is a lot of clients just wanted to wait, like with that Virginia Maritime Association 2020 thing, like it was their 100th anniversary. You can't really move that, right? So as far as into another year or anything like that, that's why we went the virtual route to kind of end that century for them and in celebration. But yes, so when we first started, our last full in-person event was March. It was for a STEM education sort of thing. We raised money there as well. And so that was in March. After that, we had a dip in live events. Now we do some marketing stuff for clients as well. Like we do a newsletter out to different things. We do some social media and things like that. So we still have business, but as far as in-person events, those were stopped for a few months while everybody was kind of figuring out what to do or what not to do, because people are scared. And then recently, the last 3 months, I would say, we've had that pickup where we're doing a lot more virtual events. People are comfortable with muting and unmuting themselves and different things like that. And we're not as scared of the technology. So yeah, it's coming back with a vengeance. It's just right now, some people just have virtual fatigue a little bit when it's just kind of like our Brady Bunch boxes and things like that. So having that big engagement and stuff is what's key, and making the event as valuable to the attendee as possible, and communicating that is imperative.
All right. Any other questions while we're still hanging out? If not, it's the red button in the bottom right corner. Well, thanks everyone. Hope you got something. Hope to see you get in one of these.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
All right. Thanks, Ben. This is always a fun part. It's who's going to be first to leave? Who's going to be last to leave?
Yeah,
Patricia's the winner. Yay, Patricia.
You can probably stop recording now.
All right.
Cool.